Part 11. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Long. Chapter 103. A group of zombies pounced directly on Aquan. Aquan also had some skills, but so many zombies rushed towards him. After dodging left and right a few times, he finally had no room to move, and was quickly knocked down by the zombies. On the ground, pressing hard. Subai was still recalling the feeling of soul communication with zombies just now. This feeling is very strange. I have never learned it before, but it comes naturally in the zombie state. The name of this story world is Mr. Zombie. Although I have encountered that terrifying fox demon before, if nothing else, the most terrifying thing in this world is zombies. Does this also mean that I can also communicate with that zombie? If this path works, then this story world may become easier to a certain extent. To say the least, there will be at least one more path. However, just before Subai could finish his thoughts, Lin Zhenying's figure appeared at the door. What he saw was Subai, who had turned into a zombie, and Subai was still wearing the clothes of his disciple Aoyang. For Lin Zhenying, Aoyang and Aquan were the disciples who were often beaten, scolded by him, but this was Lin Zhenying's fatherly discipline for them. Aquan were both orphans, and Lin Zhenying was also single, so really he regarded these two disciples as his sons. At this time, Lin Zhenying, who was so angry that he couldn't think about why the zombies changed clothes on purpose, was thinking about revenge for his disciples. I don't care if you are the ancestor of Mr. Chen or not, let's destroy this evil obstacle of yours first. Obstacle, take your life. Lin Zhenying stepped forward, first took out a belt from his waist, then used the belt to buckle the neck of a zombie that was pressing on Aquan, and tore the zombie away. Then he followed the same pattern and killed several zombies. Pull apart. Subai was afraid that the misunderstanding would escalate, so he ordered the zombies to retreat. However, Lin Zhenying did not feel the kindness released by Subai. After rescuing Aquan, Lin Zhenying rushed towards Subai. Forest. Subai was about to speak, but Lin Zhenying kicked him. This was a kick specifically designed to kick zombies, with a powerful kick. Lin Zhenying kicked Subai below the neck and above the chest, suppressing what Subai wanted to say. Subai flew backwards and hit the wall, denting the wall. This is enough to show the seriousness of Lin Zhenying's actions. In the room, there was an altar table with a set of Taoist priests' magical tools on it. Lin Zhenying turned around and pulled out a mahogany sword, opened it with his own blood, and stabbed Subai. Subai originally wanted to return to the normal state. The previous fight with Lin Zhenying in the zombie state left Subai with some psychological shadow. However, with Lin Zhenying's posture, he could still block the physical defense of the zombies. If he returned to the normal state at this time, I guess Lin Zhenying can cut off his own head without saying a word. The peachwood sword drew a sword flower with an indomitable momentum. Subai did not dare to resist and quickly retreated. However, his body quickly retreated to the wall. Lin Zhenying held the sword in one hand and grabbed a large handful of paper talismans with the other. Sprinkled on Subai, and then, Lin Zhenying bit the tip of his tongue, spurted out a mouthful of blood, and used the blood to activate the paper talisman. The paper talisman hit Subai's body. In an instant, it was like an electric snake dancing wildly. Subai's hair with a muffled groan, his body broke through the wall and rolled down into the courtyard outside. Lin Zhenying wanted to kill Subai at all costs this time, but Subai was still timid because of the main mission. In the face of this confrontation, he suddenly fell into a complete disadvantage. As a last resort, Subai put away his zombie state. However, Lin Zhenying just shouted angrily, "Hey, you have become a spirit. Since you have become a spirit, you must have developed your spiritual intelligence. This is a very difficult thing for zombies, but why are you still stubborn and killing people? If your hands are stained with blood, do you really not understand the principle of retribution? Subai. I've turned into a human, what else do you want from me? Subai felt like he was about to cry without tears, but Lin Zhenying rushed over again. Obviously, he had gone crazy because of the bad news of Apprentice's death. At this time, his eyes were red, and he obviously couldn't listen at all. The words, and the brain cannot think, the only thing that can be thought of is to kill Subai. Oh shit. Subai also got angry. Lying on the ground, he tilted his head back and exposed two fangs at the corners of his mouth. His whole person's temperament became sinister and strange. The vampire state was triggered by him. This state had received the influence of the fat man. Try to find out that vampires do not naturally conflict with Taoist magic, so if Lin Zhenying continues to use the method of dealing with zombies to deal with Subai, it will be ineffective. This ability to switch physical states was also obtained by Subai when he was almost killed by the blood leech in the previous story world. It can be regarded as a blessing in disguise. The Daomu sword slashed across Subai's shoulder, creating a crack. Generally speaking, the Daomu sword mostly hits zombies, rather than actually stabbing them with the Daomu sword. This is because the zombie's body is very hard. Secondly, it is because it is more convenient to disperse the evil spirits on zombies, and evil spirits are extremely important to zombies and can be regarded as a foundation. Precisely because of this, Lin Zhenying's sword did not cause as much damage to Subai as before. If it was a silver sword, it would be another matter, but the peachwood sword did not have any restraint effect on vampires. Subai took advantage of the situation and clasped Lin Zhenying's neck with one hand. His sharp nails touched Lin Zhenying's skin. However, Subai subconsciously restrained his impulse and instinct to pierce his nails into Lin Zhenying's neck and turned instead. He rushed forward and brought Lin Zhenying up, then lowered his arms and pressed Lin Zhenying to the ground. Listen to me, I'm not. Before Subai finished speaking, there was a sound of breaking through the air behind him. Subai suddenly jumped up from Lin Zhenying. Quan actually rushed over with the dagger Subai took out from the demon cave. Just now, it was intended to attack him secretly. Subai himself had never tried this dagger to see if it had any side effects, but this did not mean that Subai was willing to experience it for himself. Quan didn't wait for Lin Zhenying to get up, and rushed towards Subai again. It was obvious that he was overestimating his capabilities. Subai quickly dodged, and then grabbed Quan's wrist with one hand. With a force, Quan's palm spread out, and the dagger fell into Subai's hand. Then Subai kicked Quan in the chest. Kicked Quan out. Lin Zhenying had already gotten up from the ground, picked up the peachwood sword, and rushed towards Subai again. Again. Subai gritted his teeth. Facing the crazy Lin Zhenying, he really felt a deep sense of powerlessness. His task was to protect him, but now he was facing him life and death. It really made Subai I was very speechless, and the beginning of the matter was actually when Subai finally escaped from the demon cave. Before he could get to the ground, Lin Zhenying was prodding him with a mahogany sword. Subai was lying on his back all the way. Lin Zhenying was obviously unwilling to die. Subai couldn't fight or kill him, so he was too restrained. At that moment, he decided to leave here first and then make plans again. At least take care of his injuries first. Immediately, Subai turned around and climbed up on the wall. However, Lin Zhenying actually jumped over, crossed the wall, and stabbed Subai's neck with his sword. This is real Qinggong. This time Lin Zhenying also learned the lesson from the previous time. Instead of striking with the sword, he directly stabbed Subai's neck with the tip of the sword. Subai had to lean back, then jumped off the wall and landed on the ground. Lin Zhenying stood firmly on the wall and looked at Subai coldly. But at this moment, a person appeared behind Lin Zhenying. The person held a wooden stick and hit Lin Zhenying directly on the back of the head. Lin Zhenying was caught off guard and was hit hard. He spurted out a mouthful of blood and his whole body fell from the wall. He fell down and landed on the stone slab under the wall, motionless. This. Subai opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. On the wall, Gyatso's figure appeared. Gyatso's body was also covered in scars, and there were several scars on his face. Obviously, this man from Tibet suffered a lot when he came out of the demon cave, but Gyatso's kung fu it is indeed powerful, and he has been specially trained, but Lin Zhenying's kung fu is more in Taoism. This kind of kung fu in fists and feet is naturally not comparable to Gyatso, let alone Gyatso's sneak attack this time. Gyatso jumped down from the wall. Without even looking at Lin Zhenying, he walked up to Subai and stretched out his hand, intending to pull Subai to stand up. Subai did not stand up in a hurry, but looked at Gyatso. Didn't you receive the main mission? Subai was wondering if he had triggered the main mission alone, and the others had not yet triggered it. Unexpectedly, Gyatso shook his head directly and said, I got it. I just came to this town and I sensed a familiar evil spirit here. I knew it was you. Are you okay? Are you okay? What is your main mission? Subai continued to ask. Oh, I was just about to discuss with you how to find the person named Lin Zhenying. Do you have any clues? Subai looked at Master Lin, who was lying motionless in front of him, and took a deep breath. He suddenly thought of one thing, that is, judging from Gyatso's growing up and living environment, he had never seen Lin Zhenying's zombie movie. Things that make sense. But now, what to do? Xiaolong is here to ask for everyone's guaranteed monthly tickets. Don't panic, hold on tight to the dragon. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Xiaolong. Chapter 104. Fortunately, at this time, Subai had not received the task prompt saying that it had failed, which meant that Lin Zhenying was not dead yet. Subai stood up, walked to Lin Zhenying's side, squatted down, stretched out his hand and tested it between his breaths. He wasn't dead, but he was breathing more out than in, and he felt like he was about to die. Gyatso thought he had been attacked, so he didn't have time to think about anything else. He just came up and hit Lin Zhenying on the back of the head with a sap. Of course, the most important thing is that he does not know Lin Zhenying. A Quan over there saw that his master had been knocked to the ground with a stick and was motionless. He immediately ran over shouting, "Master, Master!" Unfortunately, this was not a cliché scene in a movie or TV series. Gyatso didn't let a Quan run away. In the past, he hugged Lin Zhenying and cried and yelled. Then he suddenly realized that there was an opportunity to explode the small universe to fight back and kill all the villains. He swept a Quan with a stick and was swept to the ground. Then he poked a Quan in the chest with the stick, knocking a Quan to the ground. Quan was pressed to the ground unable to move. Immediately, Gyatso looked at Subai who was squatting next to Lin Zhenying and asked. Don't tell me, that person is Lin Zhenying. Subai sighed, I really hope he is not. Gyatso closed his eyes and calmed down his emotions. He knew how heavy the stick he just hit was. It was already a small miracle that the opponent was not dead yet. But if he is not dead now, it is estimated that he is not even close to death. How far away it is, half of the foot has already entered the gate of hell. If I had known, I wouldn't have saved you. You are a vampire anyway. You won't die after being stabbed with a sword. Subai touched his nose, then squatted down and carried Lin Zhenying on his back, first put him on the bed, and then think of a way to save him. I know some medical skills, Gyatso said, and then pointed to Quan lying on the ground. What should I do about this? Tied. Gyatso nodded. Just like that, in the bedroom of Yizhuang, Lin Zhenying was lying on the bed. Gyatso had already given him a massage. In Gyatso's words, the back of the head was very fragile. After being hit hard by himself, Lin Zhenying fell into a coma. He may wake up after a day or two and nothing will happen, or he may die in a coma in a daze. A Quan and Chen Yuanwei were tied to pillars. A Liang and Miss Chen who woke up were also tied up by Subai. In the room, except for the unconscious Lin Zhenying who was free, everyone else was tied up. Subai sat on the threshold. It was already dark, and the moon and stars were sparse. There was not so much industrial pollution in this era, so the sky was still very clear. Gyatso was baptized and walked to Subai. "Monk, there is no news yet." "He made a lot of noise in the demon cave," Subai said, "but I don't think the monk will die." "His destiny is very hard," Gyatso said. "Moreover, that demon cave was obviously suppressed by Buddhist monks who knew how many years ago. The monks should have some natural advantages there. As long as he doesn't let it slip." Subai suddenly remembered the scene when the fox demon let out a roar and flew out to find the monk. In fact, Subai could guess some clues. The monk should have had some opportunity in the demon cave, and then in order to obtain the opportunity and more, the good thing is that he didn't hesitate to risk his life, otherwise he could have escaped, and Gyatso could have escaped as well. "I don't believe that the monk who still occupies a certain home field advantage has not appeared yet." Put yourself in Subai's shoes. In fact, if he were in Subai's shoes, if he mistakenly entered a place where the vampire clan hides, he would probably make the same choice as the monk. Starve the timid to death, and starve the bold to death. In the story world, if you don't take the initiative, you will die sooner or later. In the sky, the moon suddenly seemed to be dyed, with a little bit of scarlet. Subai felt it, raised his head and looked at the sky. Gyatso, who was standing next to Subai, also raised his head and looked at the strange scene in the sky. "Does this mean that the house leaked and it rained all night?" Subai asked. Gyatso took a deep breath and imitated the monk's tone and replied, "Yes. Obviously, the horror broadcast will not allow the plot to go down so smoothly. If the main plot of the story is just for Subai and others to try their best to treat Lin Zhenying and pray to the Buddha to extend his life, it would be too boring." In fact, Subai felt that Lin Zhenying was almost turned into a vegetative state after being beaten with a stick by Gyatso. Maybe terrorist broadcast himself had not expected it. The blood moon was in the sky, and even Subai himself could feel that the evil energy around him suddenly became stronger. This is the time when evil things are most active, and we are here in Yizhuang. "Aren't you the biggest evil thing here?" Gyatso asked. "You are a bad person, Gyatso. After staying with that monk for a long time, you actually know how to be sarcastic." Subai patted his trouser legs and stood up. "The Yizhuang has begun to become restless. Over there, is Lin Zhenying's zombie army. I don't know what the setting means. He, Lin Zhenying, doesn't want to rebel against the Qing dynasty and restore the Ming dynasty, so why would he have so many zombies lined up at home? These are your relatives. You are responsible for comforting them. In the wing over there, many ghosts and demons must have been suppressed and sealed. They are Lin Zhenying's collection. I will be responsible for strengthening the seals and suppressing them. If this is all we have to do tonight, it won't be a big hassle," Subai said. "This is only the first day. Our main mission is for 7 days. The first day may just be appetizers and main dishes, but they haven't been served yet. Then let's eat the cold dishes first." Subai stood up, looked at the 4 people tied there, and said, "It's not safe. They are uncertain factors if we leave." "Then break their hands and feet," Gyatso suggested. Subai shook his head. "This is too extreme. Moreover, we have not completely broken up with Lin Zhenying now. We can still explain it as a misunderstanding. If he wakes up and finds that all his apprentices have been disabled by us, you will probably fight with us even if you die together." Subai walked up to a Quan and a Liang. Both a Quan and a Liang looked at Subai with horrified expressions. Opening his mouth, Subai wanted to explain something, and even planned to untie the 2 of them first, but when he spoke, he looked at the fear in the eyes of a Quan and a Liang, and even, resentful, Subai said. Gyatso, where is your stick? Bang. Bang. With two muffled sounds, a Quan and a Liang were knocked unconscious. Gyatso stood aside with his hands on his chest. I thought you had a better way. Let's settle this once and for all. After returning the stick to Gyatso, the two of them walked out of the bedroom, one walking east and the other west. No matter what happens in other parts of the town tonight, their mission is to stabilize Yizhuang. Returning to the house again, there was still a hole in the wall on one side of the house. This was caused when Subai was beaten out by Lin Zhenying. Even now, Subai still had some blood flowing up, and the hole from before was still there. He has not fully recovered from his injuries. The zombies in the room were still arranged in the same queue as before, but when Subai entered, he found that although the zombies did not move, they were swaying back and forth. Apparently, stimulated by the blood moon, these zombies were already a little restless. Subai clapped his hands, then shook his shoulders, closed his eyes, and his body began to become thinner, switching to zombie state, his green eyes scanning all the zombies below. Quiet. All the zombies suddenly stood still, motionless. Subai looked at the zombies in front of him, and suddenly an idea came to his mind. Can he control these zombies to do things for him in this story world? Or, even in the real world, it seems that I can get some zombies to control. Even if I can't let them do anything harmful to avoid having the cause and effect calculated on myself, I can use them to visit homes and nursing homes. But after thinking about it, Subai found that this idea was useless. The reason why he was able to make them listen to him now was not because his zombie blood level was higher than theirs, but because these zombies had talisman stickers on their foreheads. Their IQs have been suppressed by Taoist methods, so they can only listen to themselves. In this state, they are actually not very stable. If something goes wrong, they may hurt their own people. Moreover, there is a bruise on their forehead. With the talisman stuck on them, these zombies could only jump around and line up to perform a flag-raising ceremony. At most, they could swarm up to suppress people, but they couldn't do other higher-level things. Unless his bloodline can continue to improve. Subai pursed his lips. He really needed to find a way to do this. After all, there were not many places where he could rely on WeChat stores to redeem his promotion. However, now that the zombies had returned to calm, Subai felt relieved and prepared to go back and check Lin Zhenying's place again, because now it was just him and Gyatso, each assigned a place to suppress it, and Lin Zhenying's place was unattended. Subai always felt uneasy. However, just as Subai turned around to leave, his steps suddenly stopped, then he turned back and looked at the zombie phalanx below. He walked down, walking very slowly, walking through the zombies. Finally, he stopped in front of a zombie. I said something was wrong, but it turned out to be here. This zombie must be old. It looks no different from other zombies, with a livid complexion. However, there is one detail about his Manchu official uniform that is different. The horror broadcast may have changed some things for the sake of storytelling. For example, Lin Zhenying was originally an active figure during the Republic of China, but now he appeared in the Qing dynasty. For example, during the Qing dynasty, he actually dared to dress these zombies in imitation official uniforms. Clothes. But fortunately, the horror broadcast also paid attention to the fact that these official uniforms do not have specific symbols. For example, the official uniforms of the first, second, and third grades will have different symbols embroidered with animals. During the Qing dynasty, civil official uniforms were decorated with birds, and military official uniforms were decorated with animals. Beast. It means dressed beast, which originally meant officials, but because the behavior of officials was really disappointing, dressed beast gradually became a derogatory meaning. The rest of the zombie official uniforms only had this style, with some random landscapes and flowers embroidered on them, but the one in front of Subai had a unicorn embroidered on the chest. What does embroidered unicorn mean? First grade military attaché. Facing the zombie, Subai opened his mouth and blew a breath. The talisman on the zombie's forehead fell lightly. At the same time, the zombie slowly opened its mouth. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 105. Gyatso walked to Lin Zhenying's basement in Yazhuangli. It was a bit too big to call it a basement. It was more like an underground dojo, almost as big as a basketball court. There are bottles and jars placed on the surrounding walls. At this time, because of the blood moon, the surrounding atmosphere has become very strange, and the suppressed things in these bottles and jars have also begun to become restless. One of the red clay pots looked particularly eye-catching at this time. Not only was there a ring of light flashing inside, but the entire pot also began to shake and sway constantly, as if it was impatient to rush out. Gyatso's eyes narrowed, and a smile appeared on his lips. Sure enough, the Central Plains Taoists always pay attention to leaving a trace in everything they do. These evil obstacles that are obviously entangled with the sins of cause and effect cannot bear to be destroyed. Instead, they are sealed here to sharpen their viciousness and then reincarnate. Why bother? If everyone acted like this, wouldn't all the exorcists in the world be exhausted? Gyatso comes from Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, and the style of Tantric Buddhism is characterized by unscrupulous means before achieving the goal. They only focus on results and do not like to care about the details, so Tantric Buddhism often gives people a mysterious and terrifying look. Faced with these things that became restless under the blood moon, Gyatso's response was simple. That is, kill. Gyatso walked directly to the red jar, raised the jar with one hand, then closed his eyes and recited the mantra silently. A faint golden light bloomed on Gyatso, and the golden light disappeared into the red jar. The things began to struggle like crazy and kept hitting the jar, but the golden light that was originally on Gyatso's body had been transferred to the jar at this time, which had the best suppressive effect. A streak of blood appeared between Gyatso's eyebrows, and a streak of blood shot out from between his eyebrows and shot directly into the jar. A piercing scream came from the empty environment of the basement. Finally, it calmed down. The red can burst open, and streams of pus began to overflow, bringing with it a stench. But Gyatso didn't care at all. Behind the temple where he practiced, there was a place comparable to purgatory on earth. His mind had long been as hard as iron. The fate of this monster directly suppressed everything else here, and the surrounding area suddenly became quiet, as if all the things suppressed by the seal became as chilling as humans. Evil things need evil people to grind them down. Gyatso stood here like a fierce god, and none of those monsters dared to be presumptuous. Just when Gyatso felt that it was almost here and was about to leave here and go back to Lin Zhenying's place to have a look, a weasel appeared at the stairs leading to the basement. The weasel looked at Gyatso there with a look of grievance and fear. Kyo, like a timid little daughter-in-law who is afraid of being punished if she does something wrong. Is there another transformed one here? Gyatso walked over, and the weasel retreated to the edge of the steps. However, when Gyatso's feet just stepped onto the steps instantly changed and turned into a ferocious beast with a bloody mouth. Gyatso's eyes narrowed and he shouted. How dare you cast illusion spells on me? How dare a pearl of rice compete with the bright moon? Everything around him began to change, but Gyatso still walked forward steadily, walking up the steps and walking into the huge mouth, moving forward indomitably. A tantric monk should have such stubborn tenacity. Perhaps, they are less tactful, less accidental, and more unkind than the monks in the Central Plains, but to a certain extent, they are closer to their own inner persistence. Compared with monk Kilo, Gyatso has a lot less thoughts on human nature and sophistication, but more of a devotion to the Buddha. The beast's mouth began to crack, and finally dissipated completely, and everything around it quickly returned to its original state. The weasel was still the same weasel, but blood was flowing out from its eyes, which was very miserable. Things that don't overestimate their capabilities. Gyatso stretched out his hand and lifted the dying weasel up. What he wanted was the weasel's inner elixir. A weasel who had developed spiritual intelligence and could even actively control illusions. His inner elixir was comparable to the century-old Ganoderma lucidum is a great tonic. With this thing, if Lin Zhengying takes it, at least he will be able to live longer. However, Gyatso only felt a sudden light in his hand, and the weasel's skin slipped down directly, so naturally and so abruptly, and he was holding a purple centipede in his hand. The centipede's mouthparts lifted up, and then it stabbed into the back of Gyatso's hand. Hiss! Gyatso threw the centipede away, staggered, and hurriedly sat cross-legged and began to detoxify, but his eyelids became heavier and heavier, and his vision began to become extremely blurry. The basement, which had been quiet, started to get noisy again after Gyatso sat cross-legged. Outside the gate of Yizhuang, an old beggar on crutches walked slowly. The old beggar was lame in one leg and could not walk very conveniently. His face was a little sunken due to malnutrition, and he was almost thin. Became skin and bones. "I'm really hungry." The old beggar sighed, then walked up the steps, knocked lightly on the vermilion door of Yizhuang, and knocked several times. No one opened the door in Yizhuang, and of course no one would open the door. The old beggar reached out and pushed the door open. The door opened. The door of Yizhuang was originally unlocked, because the people who locked the door before nightfall were all knocked unconscious at this time. The old beggar poked his head inside. Now that the door was open, he walked in. He knew this was Yizhuang, but now he was really hungry and tired, so he wanted to find a place to sleep. If he could get some food, that would be the best. For him it is said that every day counts as one day at a time. The old beggar walked into the kitchen first. There was also dinner cooked by a Quan in the kitchen, but the master and disciples didn't have the chance to enjoy it today. The old beggar pounced on it and stuffed the food into his mouth. He ate it all soon. I ate in a hurry. In the end, my belly was full. I breathed a sigh of relief, and sat on the ground. It's been a long time since I've eaten so full. The old beggar took a sip and coughed. After resting for a while, he decided to walk around the village again. Since he had food to eat, he might be able to find something special, such as a good piece of clothing. People's desires will change with the changes in their environment. Now that the old beggar is full, and the food comes so easily, he naturally wants more. After eating a full meal, I feel more energetic when walking. Although I am using a cane, my speed is not slow. The old beggar came to the door of the bedroom. He stretched out his hand and gently pushed the door open. The door was pushed open a gap. He thought that the master should be resting, but he still wanted to come and take a look. Then, through the crack in the door, the old beggar saw the 4 people tied to the pillars, and immediately showed a look of surprise. He instinctively wanted to leave here to report to the county government or leave on his own, because this family was obviously it was a thief, but when the old beggar's eyes fell on Miss Chen, whose eyes were closed and her mouth was gagged, his breathing suddenly became rapid. He couldn't help but swallow, and then looked around. It seemed that the thief had robbed the things and left, which happened to be an advantage for him. The old beggar opened the door completely and walked in. Miss Chen and Mr. Chen were not knocked unconscious, but their mouths were stuffed with something, their hands and feet were tied, and they could not scream or move. More importantly, they were tied sideways facing the door, and facing the door were a Quan and a Liang, but these 2 brothers were still in a state of being knocked unconscious by Subai and were not yet awake at this time. The old beggar opened the door and crept in. He saw another person lying on the bed, but he looked like he was about to die. Since entering the door, The old beggar has been staring at Miss Chen's figure, licking his lips constantly. He first approached the pillar, and then pulled off 2 more pieces of cloth from his rags. Originally, when Yuan Chen and Miss Chen heard the sound of the door opening, they thought it was Subai and Gyatso who had left and returned. They were both hungry and tired and too lazy to struggle, so they still maintained their original posture. It wasn't until Chen Yuanwai's eyes were suddenly blindfolded that Chen Yuanwai felt something was wrong and immediately began to struggle. However, Gyatso's binding technique was very good and firm, and Chen Yuanwai's struggle seemed meaningless. The old beggar covered Miss Chen's face with a piece of linen cloth. Just when the old beggar was about to forget everything, a panting man appeared outside the bedroom door, saw what was happening inside, and immediately cursed. "Damn it, who the hell are you? You're actually trying to learn from Yin's hyping here. The next chapter will be written at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Everyone can rest and read it tomorrow morning. Thank you all for staying up late tonight to accompany Dragon on the shelves. Don't panic, hold on tight to the dragon. There are at least 3 more updates today." Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 106. What does it mean to be a zombie wearing the official uniform of a military attaché of the Qing dynasty? One thing is certain, this is definitely not a zombie suppressed by Lin Zhenying and his disciples, but someone who appears from nowhere and sneaks in. Moreover, it can be seen from the fact that he was able to deliberately hide with other zombies to avoid Subai's attention. This guy have IQ. When an animal has a high IQ, it would be a very scary thing. On Earth, humans are not as fast as cheetahs, nor as strong as elephants, nor as brave as tigers, nor as good at fighting as lions. But the reason why humans can develop to the top level of the Earth's food chain, the reason is that human beings have IQ, or it is more appropriate to call it wisdom. When a zombie that is immortal, does not enter reincarnation, and has jumped out of the 5 elements has wisdom and no longer relies on the instinctive ferocity of eating hair and drinking blood to control its behavior, this means that it has become extremely terrifying. Moreover, even according to the tradition of the feudal dynasty, when officials die and are buried, they are usually awarded titles. This military attaché may be a bit unworthy of the name, but at least it can explain one thing. This zombie must have been awarded a title or title during his lifetime. If a person like this turns into a zombie, anyone with a brain and the ability to think can probably feel how terrifying he will be. When Subai blew off the invalid paper talisman on the other person's forehead that he should have deliberately put on it, the zombie slowly opened his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curved, revealing a weird smile. His pupils were red, while Subai's were green. The 2 zombies were now facing each other. The surrounding air suddenly condensed at this time, as if the cold temperature made them turn into water droplets. A buzz sound came out. Subai and the zombie took action together. Subai's nails directly pierced the opponent's neck, but the opponent did not resist at all and took a step forward. The opponent's neck was like steel, and it also carried a strong evil spirit. Subai's arm had not yet touched it. The other party's body was bounced away, and then as the other party's body took a step forward, the huge air pressure it brought went straight towards Subai. Subai was swept away and fell directly outside the door. Lying on the ground, Subai couldn't get up for a while, and black blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. After all, he was somewhat different from a pure zombie. Buzz. 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 A series of neat sounds sounded, and the whole house collapsed at this moment, raising a lot of dust. Subai waved his hand and subconsciously moved his body back on the ground. After the dust settled and his vision became clear, Subai saw the zombie standing on the ruins, as well as dozens of zombies next to that zombie that Lin Zhenying had originally suppressed, but now these zombies would no longer listen to Subai's orders. On the one hand, this zombie of the first-grade military attaché directly suppressed Subai at the zombie level, that is, at the life level. His instructions were more authoritative than Subai. On the other hand, because of these few, the paper talismans on the foreheads of the 10 zombies have all disappeared. It is obvious that the Taoist suppression power on these zombies was broken by the first-grade military attaché zombie. Now, it's just a zombie general with dozens of zombie soldiers around him. This scene is really familiar. Subai remembered watching those Hong Kong and Taiwan zombie movies when he was a child. There were many plots in which advanced zombies came out to find ordinary zombies to be his subordinates. However, Subai did not expect that he would also encounter this scene. Ah! The zombie opened its mouth to Subai and exhaled a breath of white air. There was an obvious look of ridicule on his face, as if he was mocking Subai for overestimating his abilities. At the same time, a very old voice suddenly came from the bottom of Subai's heart, very hoarse, but very oppressive. "You, follow me." Subai knew that this was the zombie talking to him. Subai suddenly felt that it was very interesting. He went to the story world and met a big zombie who said he would accept him as his younger brother. "Why?" Subai responded in the manner of a zombie. When zombies talk, they will make a friction sound in their throats. This kind of conversational communication method is difficult to interpret scientifically, but it does exist, just like it is now scientifically related to many people. How animals of different species communicate with each other is also poorly understood. Because, you are, smarter than them. Subai couldn't help coughing a few times. This reason was indeed very convincing. Compared with these other ordinary zombies, he could indeed crush them in terms of IQ. Subai suddenly thought of the monk. In fact, both he and Gyatso were able to come out of the demon cave alive, which meant that it was not difficult for the monk. However, the monk has no shadow yet. Obviously the monk's ambition and the intention is bigger. He should be following the policy of not getting into the tiger's den to catch the tiger's cubs, and looking for the legacy of the previous generations of eminent monks who suppressed these monsters in the monster's den. And now, there is a similar opportunity in front of Subai. Subai is not afraid of following this zombie. He is really not afraid. If he can find a way to improve his zombie bloodline by following this zombie, this is what Subai is eager to do. After all, Subai's own bloodline upgrades due to several factors. The reason for the intertwining of blood has mutated, and he cannot rely on story points through the formal channel of Wadian. He can only rely on himself. "Okay, I can go with you, but you can't kill the people here. You can do whatever you want with the people in other places." Subai made this request. As long as Lin Zhenying and the others are kept safe now, he can ensure that the main mission one will not fail. At that time, Gyatso will be left to take care of Lin Zhenying. It doesn't matter if he goes out with this zombie, even if it involves murder and arson. Who would have thought that after Zombie heard Subai's request, he refused without any consideration? "You are not qualified to negotiate terms with me, and there is a Taoist priest here, who hurt my origin. Today, I am here to take revenge." Subai was completely upset. The other party actually came to kill Lin Zhenying, but for the sake of his main mission, how could he let him kill Lin Zhenying? This is straightforward and there is no need to talk about it. Subai exhaled a breath, and his whole body returned to the appearance of an ordinary person, and then stood up staggeringly from the ground. The zombie seemed to be very surprised by Subai's change, but he didn't say anything too much because Subai's attitude was already obvious. Rejection means death. Actually, for me, there is no difference between the two. Subai picked up the dagger in his hand. To be honest, Subai really didn't have much confidence in fighting this military zombie. All he could do now was delay it for a while, although Subai actually felt that I guess it would be difficult to even delay it for a while. Gyatso should have heard the noise and ran away with Lin Zhenying first. As for the rest of the people, just die if they die, it doesn't matter. Subai didn't know now that Gyatso had encountered something similar to him. He was still trying to exorcise the poison in the basement surrounded by many evil spirits. His five senses were all blurred and blocked, even if he could hear what was happening here. According to the news, it is estimated that Gyatso is now powerless to transfer Lin Zhenying. The Zombie King took 2 steps forward. He walked, not jumped. Subai could see this detail clearly, which meant that the methods of dealing with ordinary zombies should have no effect on him. However, Lin Zhenying was able to severely injure him back then, which was indeed a good move. Just when the Zombie King was about to attack Subai, a black cloud suddenly appeared in the sky. There were electric snakes dancing in the clouds. The Zombie King raised his head and looked at the sky. The light in his eyes swayed, reflecting at this time, he began to feel panicked. This is a calamity cloud. Someone is reporting everything that happens here to heaven, asking God to send down thunderous punishments and clean up the rules and regulations. I am the third eye, and I am at odds with the sky. The eyes are like thunder and lightning, shining brightly. Seeing everything from the outside to the inside, nothing is hidden. Hurry like a law. A plump figure leaped from a distance, yes, leaped. Seeing this familiar figure, seeing this guy who could still be associated with the words light as a swallow even though he was so fat, Subai knew who was coming. In fact, even Subai didn't expect that the fat man was actually the same person. He was chosen to be included in this story world, and now it seems that he appeared just in time. Although the relationship between Subai and Fatty is a bit awkward now, at least everyone has the same purpose now, which is to protect Lin Zhenying from death, so when we face external pressure together, we don't have to worry about anything else. The calamity clouds were getting thicker and heavier, and there was a faint sound of thunder. This was not caused by Fatty's own abilities. He was just a messenger, sending this message to everyone. The breath of the Zombie King is pulled up to the sky, and the law of heaven will naturally react as it should. After the fat man finished reciting the spell, he held Lin Zhenying's mahogany sword in his hand and pointed it straight down. Boom! A bolt of lightning fell from the sky, and everyone below, including all the zombies, did not dare to move at all at this time. This was the power of heaven. Moreover, there are zombies, monsters, and Taoist priests in this story world, so in this story world, the power of heaven is clearer and more terrifying. In another story world, Fatty probably wouldn't be able to draw down the thunder. The zombie was struck by lightning and turned into ashes. The fat man turned around and landed on the ground, kneeling on one knee beside Subai. His body was covered with sweat. He even put on the Taoist robe that Lin Zhenying had worn when moving the tomb. Hoo hoo, hoo hoo. The fat man looked at Subai and gasped, Abai, Fatty, am I handsome? Obviously, the fat man had already overdrawn himself by inducing Tianli, and he couldn't even speak in a good way. Subai looked at Fatty, then at the Zombie King in front of him who seemed to be in shock. Then he looked at the zombie mark next to the Zombie King that was instantly chopped into ashes. Finally, his eyes fell on Fatty who was sweating profusely. And his face turned pale from weakness. Fat man. Ah! You hacked the wrong zombie. Fatty. The next chapter can be written and posted in the morning, and then Long takes a nap and wakes up to continue typing. It was originally scheduled to happen at the 5th update today, but Long feels that he can write 1 or 2 more chapters. Long-time readers should all know Long's habit. Every time an outbreak breaks out, he writes it immediately and does not save the manuscript. This is something Long will not lie about. Finally, now we are number 1 on Kitty and Fantasy monthly votes list. Everyone, check your wallets and vote for Dragon if you have monthly votes. Hug the Dragon. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao Long. Chapter 107. The Zombie King stood there, making no next move. Obviously, he had been frightened, because just now, he felt that if the lightning fell on him, it was hard to say whether he could resist it. Even if you survive it, Your vitality will be severely damaged, and years of practice will be in vain. The fat man looked at the zombie king, and then at the puddle of ashes next to the zombie king, and his face bulged with anger. He had been working hard for so long, expended so much effort, and wasted so much money. He got precious exchangeable props and actually killed a zombie running errands. The zombie king was just frightened. And it's just that I was frightened, not that I was impregnated. Subai leaned closer to the fat man at this time. Fat man, can you do it again? Do you think I'm just masturbating? The fat man looked at Subai with a look of resentment. Then you block him first, and I'll move Lin Zhenying, Subai said. Why am I blocking it, not you? The fat man asked. Industry specializing in surgery. I don't even have the strength. At least you still have the strength. The fat man looked aggrieved. The zombie king finally came to his senses and jumped over. Obviously, after the fear passed, what filled his heart was boundless anger. He really almost capsized in the gutter. The fat man picked up the Daomu sword and wanted to take the initiative to rush forward, but after taking 2 steps, his legs went weak and he knelt on the ground again. Subai looked at it and knew that if he left like this, the fat man would also die, and it didn't have any effect on delaying time. I was heartbroken at that moment. I switched to vampire mode and sprinted over. I got in front of the zombie king before he could take action against the fat man. He held the dagger in his hand and stabbed him directly. The zombie king is very confident in his defense. As a zombie, and having personally attacked the zombie king, Subai clearly knows how terrifying the zombie king's defense is. Similarly, seeing that Subai was only using a dagger to deal with him, and there was no Taoist magic power on the dagger, the zombie king seemed very unconcerned. He indeed had the confidence to do so. In an instant, the evil spirit in front of him turned into a strong wind and swept over Subai's body. 10 bloody wounds immediately appeared on Subai's chest, and the skin on his chest was almost completely lifted. Even as a vampire, Subai had never suffered such a serious injury at one time. In an instant, his soul seemed to tremble at this moment, which meant that his vampire blood might not be able to withstand such a terrible level's damage. However, the dagger in Subai's hand suddenly passed through the zombie king's evil spirit defense. It even penetrated the zombie king's body defense as easily as cutting tofu, and plunged directly into the zombie king's chest. The next scene was that Subai was kneeling in front of the zombie king, his body dripping with blood, and his skin was as white as a piece of white paper. This showed that his vampire bloodline was on the verge of collapse. The ability of vampire blood can no longer help Subai survive. But Subai's right hand still held the dagger, and the front end of the dagger sank into the zombie king's body. The zombie king stood motionless. Perhaps, Subai himself did not fully realize what kind of sharp weapon the dagger he pulled out from the big fox demon's bed was. How could a tool that the great fox demon could use to grind his teeth be a mortal thing? In fact, because it has been used by the big fox demon to grind its teeth for many years, this dagger also contains extremely strong demonic energy. Demonic energy and evil energy are 2 different energy attributes, and just now, when Subai used it, the terrifying sharpness of the dagger pierced the zombie king's body at the cost of almost dying. The rich demonic energy contained in the dagger was stimulated by the powerful evil energy in the zombie's body and exploded. This directly led to the destruction of the 2 attributes. At this time, the powerful force started a melee in the zombie king's body. The zombie king now feels like his body is like a powder keg and a balloon. He feels like he is about to explode. For this reason, he neither dares to move nor can he move. Now, even if Subai knew about the zombie king's predicament, there was nothing he could do. He himself was almost in a state of confusion. Death was only separated by a veil from him, and he could be penetrated by just touching it with his hand. The fat man who was kneeling on the ground after just 2 steps looked up and saw this strange scene. He couldn't believe it. The damn fat man jumped up immediately. This meant that the previous kneeling was actually a performance to a certain extent. Inside, Fatty is indeed incapable of attracting the second thunderbolt. In fact, after losing that prop, he has no medium to continue to pull it. There is also overdraft, but it is not enough to take just a few steps. Kneel down. It was obvious that Fatty had planned to run away. If he couldn't be beaten, he could always run. Failure in main task 1 would result in a 300-point deduction. No problem. Fatty's points would be deducted enough. Saving his life was the most important thing. However, it would be a bit silly to run away from this scene. The fat man immediately gritted his teeth, bit the tip of his tongue, spit out a mouthful of tongue essence and blood and sprayed it on the peachwood sword, muttering something in his mouth. Young master, in a moment, the peachwood sword bloomed with a faint blood light. If you eat fat grandpa again, I'll strike with my sword. The fat man once again charged towards the zombie king with his sword. The zombie king let out a low drink. He did not dare to let the surrounding zombies deal with Subai because he was afraid that Subai would involve the dagger and destroy his internal balance. However, it was still possible to let the surrounding zombies deal with the fat man. However, Fatty is also an expert and has rich combat experience. The lightning that struck the wrong zombie before was actually not Fatty's own fault, but his lack of ability, plus the fact that the lightning was pulled down through the medium of external objects. Being able to control the attack towards the zombies instead of on the roof is already your best effort. Therefore, facing the swarming zombies at this time, Fatty didn't even look at it, and directly threw the red gleaming mahogany sword towards the zombie king. The zombie king's eyes narrowed, and he wanted to use the evil spirit around him to block it, but as soon as he used his evil spirit, his body seemed to boil. This caused his ability to not be used, and the peachwood sword stabbed him directly. On his forehead, the zombie king only felt that his consciousness was dizzy for a while. In an instant, he lost control of the energy in his body. The two energies completely lost their restraints and began to collide in the zombie king's body like two children fighting. Stand up. The most important thing about this kind of power confrontation is that the demonic energy cannot be digested by the zombie king, and the demonic energy is much weaker than his evil energy, so he cannot balance at all. Soon, the zombie king's body began to burn, and black and green flames began to burn on his body. The zombie king opened his mouth and let out bursts of roars. This was a great torture for him, and he also knew that he couldn't hold on for much longer. Even though Subai was on the verge of death, his hand still held the dagger tightly. The flames followed the dagger and burned all the way to Subai's body. This was a kind of pain coming from the depths of his soul, which directly stimulated Subai to raise his head. Let out a scream. In other words, this is also a kind of flashback. Even the zombie king can't last long in this kind of flames, let alone Subai, who is already on the verge of death. The burning of the flames was not only physical, but also spiritual. Because of the terrifying flames, the souls of both parties began to intersect, and fragments of each other's memories appeared in each other's minds. Subai saw a corpse buried in a general's tomb. After a tomb robber opened the coffin, it woke up and turned into a zombie. He killed all the tomb robbers and then developed a great thirst for blood. He left his general's tomb and went outside to kill people and suck their blood. He was seriously injured by Lin Zhenying, who looked very young at the time. He was lucky enough to escape and return to his general's tomb. The zombie king saw from Subai's memory that Subai was being sucked by blood leeches. Subai was immersed in the illusion and his body was drained of blood, but in the end, the corpse poison contained in his body rebounded and inspired the zombies. Bloodline. As for how Subai obtained the vampire bloodline and how he balanced the two bloodlines, the zombie king did not see it in Subai's memory, even if he deliberately searched for it. Because he can't see it. The horror broadcast would not let him see it. If he had seen it, he wouldn't be a zombie in this story world bent on revenge against Lin Zhenying. Not every NPC in the story world has the ability or qualification to know what kind of world they are in and what kind of existence they are, like the convenience store owner in Sudbai's last story world. He also took the initiative to fight against the terrorist broadcast. In the end, he naturally failed. His struggle was directly used by the terrorist broadcast to increase the story. However, in the end, he allowed Sudbai and Sophia to live easily past the mission. Because the two of them expressed respect for him, this was enough for the convenience store owner. Even if the fight against the terrorist broadcast failed in the end, at least he has the ability to be willful about this small detail, especially for the terrorist broadcast. Don't you want a wonderful story with ups and downs? I deliberately let your story end anticlimactically. The Zombie King failed to find the reason why Sudbai had two bloodlines. Now, there was no time for him to find the reason. He grabbed Sudbai's neck with both hands. Come, bite me, I'll give you my true origin. The Zombie King planned to let Sudbai absorb his own origin, first reduce the content of evil spirits in his body, and then let the evil spirits and evil spirits reach a state of balance before expelling the evil spirits from the body. As for the original evil spirits that he took the initiative to let Sudbai absorb, it doesn't matter, after I expel this damn demonic energy, I will eat this person again. Everything is still yours. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 108. Gyatso's skin began to turn an inky color at this time. It was obvious that the toxins had penetrated deeply, from the initial surface layer of the skin to the flesh and blood, and now it may have begun to invade the nerve center. In fact, his situation was very similar to that of Sudbai. Sudbai thought he was just trying to appease the zombies who were agitated by the appearance of the blood moon, but who could have imagined that a zombie king seeking revenge sneaked in, and he almost ended up in a situation out of control. As for Gyatso, he originally thought that he was suppressing these evil spirits that had been sealed by Lin Zhenying before, and thought that killing them would serve as a warning. However, a centipede appeared inexplicably, and in an extremely cunning manner, Gyatso was fooled. Gyatso's eyes slowly opened. At this time, his eyes were already black, without any brilliance, and looked particularly empty. After the centipede took a bite of Gyatso, it curled up there dejectedly, but its vicious eyes kept staring at Gyatso. It knew that this human being could not last long, and it wanted to watch this man die. All the sealed monsters around started cheering, as if they were waiting for a feast to arrive. Gyatso's eyes looked around. He actually couldn't see anything now, but he could feel the pleasure of the evil spirits around him. Presumptuous! Gyatso shouted loudly, and then the toxins on his body began to disappear quickly. It's enough that my heart is devoted to the Buddha. It doesn't matter if I become a demon. Tantra monks often have examples of masters who have attained the Tao suddenly become possessed. This is also because their way of practice is too extreme. Unlike the Zhonyu and Buddha generals Zhongzheng Xianghe, they are more like a sword, moving forward straight and indomitable. Therefore, after reaching one extreme point, it is easy to turn to another extreme. At this time, Gyatso was ready to become possessed. Becoming a demon was a great sacrifice for Gyatso, who devoted himself to pursuing the true path of Buddhism. It does not mean that after becoming a demon, there is no hope of ever attaining the true state of Buddhism. It is not that there are no examples of people in the demonic path becoming Buddhas in Buddhism, but the difficulty is it will become extremely large. But Gyatso made this choice without hesitation, simply because the evil spirits around him dared to be so presumptuous in front of him. Yes, for such a simple reason and such a simple motive, he abandoned his previous path and became possessed directly. After becoming possessed, the poison instantly turned into nourishment for the demon body and infiltrated into the demon body. The black in Gyatso's eyes faded and turned gray, and the pupils were also revealed. He stood up and glanced at the frightened centipede in front of him and all the pots and jars around him. Centipede was really scared this time. It was not a lie this time, because there was no way to lie. All the sealed monsters around them were also silent. In fact, their hearts were suddenly filled with a depressing atmosphere. "You are fine," Gyatso said in a deep voice, "you all have to die." At this time, Gyatso no longer cared about anything. These were Lin Zhenying's collections for many years. They provoked his dignity, and he had to punish them. Gyatso only recognized this truth, just like when Tashi and others left Tibet. Gyatso said that the next time they came back and were seen by him, they would die. Then the next time they met, the reunion between brothers and sisters after a long absence would be a direct confrontation of life and death, leaving no room for bargaining. Therefore, although Gyatso looked younger, brighter, and even a little dull and honest, Subai was closer to the monk before, because Subai also understood that the monk was good at doing things, even though he sometimes did things. There was the incident of senior brother borrowing a step to speak and then holding the senior brother against the wall, but compared to Gyatso, the monk was already worldly enough. The flames burned the soul, as if trying to squeeze out the last drop of Subai's life potential. Then, he would completely disappear, not to mention the soul, and probably not even a few traces of the body would be left. However, when the zombie king grabbed Subai's shoulders and pulled Subai close to his neck, he reacted almost instinctively. With the last instinct of survival at the critical moment of death, Subai opened his mouth and shot to the teeth are exposed. Although the vampire bloodline is now in a state of collapse, we have to admit that the potential that a person can burst out at the threshold of death will be immeasurable. Subai did not disappoint the zombie king. When he took the initiative to remove his evil spirit defense, and even took the initiative to loosen his skin and flesh, he soon felt two sharp things entering his body. Entered into one's own body. The zombie king took the initiative to send his origin and evil spirit up to Subai to devour. He had to do this, and he could only do this. When the source of the evil spirit entered Subai's body, Subai's fire of life, which was about to be extinguished, suddenly started to burn again, and burned more intensely, showing an extremely crazy posture, like a sudden light on the dry grass. A fire started and the fire spread immediately. Gradually, the flames on the zombie king and Subai began to weaken. This was because after the original evil energy in the zombie king's body was transferred to Subai, he was able to begin to balance the two forces in his body. The green aura continues to flow out of the zombie king's body. This is because he is beginning to discharge the evil spirit outside of his body. Subai's eyes began to become sharper and sharper at this time. Of course he knew what role he played just now or now. Pies do not fall from the sky, and if they do fall, they will kill people. Subai has understood this very early, and he will not believe that he will be the protagonist in a martial arts novel and be taught his skills for nothing. When the zombie king finally drained the demonic energy from his body, he let out a ferocious roar and pushed Subai away, causing Subai's fangs to leave his neck, but his hands were still like two giant pincers, holding Subai's shoulders. Obviously, the zombie king is planning to take the next step. The original evil energy is extremely precious. Of course, he cannot give up and cannot give up. At this time, the fat man was still being chased by dozens of zombies. He was completely dead and could only rely on Subai. The fat man was a little too careless now, and his body was covered in scars. It was very likely that he had been infected. Corpse poison. The zombie king opened his mouth and bit Subai's shoulder. Then he swung his head and tore off a piece of meat. Subai was silent, just watching the zombie king tearing at his body calmly. After the zombie king took 2 bites, looking at Subai who was still looking at him so calmly, he was stunned for a moment and hesitated, but he continued to bite. Subai was caught like this, watching his body being eaten away. When there were basically no good pieces of meat left in Subai's upper body, Subai was still so calm, and even had a little smile. The zombie king finally stopped eating and stared at Subai's eyes. Obviously, no matter how stupid he was, the zombie king knew that Subai's current expression and attitude were by no means as simple as pretense. I've eaten so much flesh on my body, and yet I'm still trying to be mysterious, is it possible? Subai looked at him calmly, and then slowly said, I'm not a pure zombie. There's more to me than just zombies. Just as Subai finished speaking, the zombie king shuddered and blew out a stream of cold air from his mouth. Then a layer of frost began to form on his face and skin, and his figure began to become sluggish. The hand holding Subai's hand became extremely sluggish because it was a little frozen. Subai easily broke away from his hand and continued to look into the zombie king's eyes. I wish I was a pure zombie, really. Yes, if it were a pure zombie, I could strengthen my bloodline through Wadian, and I wouldn't have to be so tired. The zombie king's body kept retreating, and in the end he could no longer retreat and could only start jumping, because his body became more stiff. Before, he was different from ordinary zombies and could walk like a human. However, now the body is unable to maintain its previous flexibility due to freezing. Subai stretched out his hand and made a fist gently. His upper body was full of exposed bones and looked very miserable. However, his expression did not show any discomfort. Instead, he looked at his current situation with interest and reached out to touch his exposed bones. He rubbed his ribs and rubbed his bloody shoulders. He didn't even look at the zombie king who was about to turn into an ice sculpture in front of him. Instead, he turned around and looked at the fat man who was being chased by a group of zombies and shouted, "Fat man, am I very artistic now?" The fat man had just been knocked down by a zombie and bit his thigh. Seeing that Subai was still asking him this question at this time, he immediately cursed. Damn it, fatty, I'm about to become an immortal, and you still ask me this, are you crazy? After hearing this, Subai nodded thoughtfully, then turned around and looked at the zombie king. The zombie king was using the evil spirit in his body to expel the cold poison, but because he transferred a large part of the original evil spirit to he killed Subai, so now his strength is greatly damaged, and his ability to dispel cold poison has also been greatly reduced. Subai walked over, and the zombie king reached out to grab Subai. Subai also stretched out his hand and grabbed the zombie king's hand. However, this time, the strength of the two sides was not the same as before. 30 years in Hedong and 30 years in Hexi have become much faster at this time. Two zombies holding hands and looking at each other. Subai was thinking and thinking, while the zombie king was taking this opportunity to desperately expel the cold poison. He didn't know what Subai wanted to do, but he felt that he only needed a little more time to expel the cold poison from his body. However, Subai's next words caused the power in the zombie king's body to riot again. You, come with me. Otherwise, die. Because you are better than them. Smarter. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 109. What the zombie king said to Subai before, Subai returned the exact words at this time, and as soon as he finished speaking, Subai directly bumped into the zombie king, and the physical contact between the two parties made a violent sound, like the collision between the two cars was extremely violent and direct. As a result, the zombie king was knocked backwards, leaving a nearly 10-meter-long ravine mark on the ground. Subai's arm seemed to be dislocated, thrown to the side of his body, and the bones on his body were exposed. Quite ferocious, but his expression is still calm, as if what he hurt himself is not his own body, but an indifferent toy. This kind of indifference can not only make opponents feel despair and chilling, but even teammates may feel a chill. The zombie king's chest had been stabbed by a dagger before, followed by the clash of evil spirit and evil spirit, and then by the burning of flames. Now it was Subai's collision that completely sunk it in. At this moment, he became extremely embarrassed. Abai, save me. The fat man couldn't hold on anymore. At this time, his hands and feet were grabbed by several zombies. If he hadn't struggled desperately, his neck would have been bitten off. Subai opened his mouth and let out a roar. With a touch of anger. The zombies that were besieging the fat man suddenly stopped and looked confused. Obviously, as the momentum of Subai and the zombie king waxed and waned, these zombies didn't know who to listen to. The zombie king got up from the ground, and the corpse energy on his body began to leak out. He had given part of his original evil energy to Subai, and his vitality was seriously injured. However, the lost energy could not be replenished. Instead, he had eaten Subai. Bai's flesh was poisoned by the cold poison, and then he was attacked by Subai who had benefited from him. This series can no longer be described with the word unlucky, and the unwillingness and resentment in the zombie king's heart are even more difficult to describe. Subai still looked at him coldly as if nothing was wrong, which made the zombie king feel a sense of powerlessness in his heart. In the eyes of the zombie king, this person was like a piece of candy that couldn't be chewed or smashed. The result after fighting again and again is this. Now, feeling the aura of the other party's body, the zombie king is not sure how much benefit the other party has actually gained from him, but in his current state, it is really I didn't dare to continue rushing forward. He was afraid. How dare you come to Pandeo to act so arrogantly? At this moment, an angry shout came from a distance. Lin Zhenying's figure appeared at the door of the bedroom, eyes wide with anger. He really looked like a fairy. Lin Zhenying was a Taoist with profound Taoism and great compassion. He doesn't need to pretend at all to show these qualities. The zombie king finally stopped hesitating, turned around, and turned into a thick black smoke and flew away. Subai really wanted to stop him and ask him how he practiced this move, but the prerequisite was that Subai still had the ability to stop him. The zombie king left, and the zombies who originally followed the zombie king left with him. Lin Zhenying did not stop him. Although these zombies would definitely cause great hidden dangers if they strayed out, Lin Zhenying continued to stand there, indifferent. When all the zombies here left, Lin Zhenying immediately held the door frame with both hands and squatted at the door, with a look of pain on his face. Obviously, he had just woken up before, but his body was extremely weak and he could not fight with Taoism. Before, he just came out to scare people, but it was considered a success. His appearance was the last straw that broke the zombie king's courage. The fat man with wounds all over his body was mumbling about glutinous rice to detoxify, while he walked up to Subai, reached out and patted Subai. Cool, bye. Then, as the fat man's slap went down, Subai fell straight to the ground, his eyes still calm. Fatty said, "Wow, what a big mistake, why don't you get killed by zombies instead of me shooting you to death?" He didn't know how long he had been unconscious. When Subai opened his eyes, he found that he was lying on the bed, his body covered with cloth strips. These were used to bandage wounds, but Subai knew that he could not actually use these. The wound has actually recovered to some extent. At the head of the bed sat Akwan. Akwan was dozing off when he was awakened by Subai's movement. He immediately stood up and snorted angrily. "I'll call the master." Subai sat silently leaning against the bed. His lips were very white. It was okay that he had not woken up. Once he woke up, the desire for fresh blood in his heart came again. At this time, he could only use fighting with your own willpower is like quitting drugs. Lin Zhenying walked in. His head was still wrapped in a bandage, and his walking steps were a little frivolous. However, he did not say anything about the misunderstanding of the previous people. Instead, he sat down directly next to Subai and put his fingers on Subai. "Start feeling the pulse on your wrist." Subai looked at Lin Zhenying. To be honest, until now, Subai felt that it was very funny that the horror broadcast completely implanted the Uncle Ying in the real world into the story world. That damn broadcast was really it's for the sake of storytelling in the world of the story. However, I have watched Uncle Ying's movies on the screen since I was a child. Now, no matter how close I am to see Uncle Ying, there is really a special feeling. Indeed, he looks quite ugly. Of course Lin Zhenying didn't know what Subai was thinking about at this time, but he was still a little embarrassed to be stared at by Subai. He seemed to have a guilty conscience. He coughed twice, took back his hand and said, "To be honest, I can't tell anything from your pulse." A smile appeared at the corner of Subai's mouth. This was natural. His body was neither human nor ghost, so how could he tell anything through his pulse? However, when I checked your injuries before, I found that the loss of qi and blood in your body was so severe that I couldn't believe it, so I asked Chen Yuanwei for some red pills bought from a Tibetan businessman, crushed them up, and applied them to you on the wound, and then. Next, Lin Zhenying stopped talking. But Subai also knew what he was going to say. It was probably his body's recovery power that scared him. The Tibetan monk told me that you have your own affairs. I apologize for the previous misunderstanding, Lin Zhenying said sincerely. It's okay. Subai really didn't mind Lin Zhenying's previous attitude of wanting to kill him. It was just the result of one misunderstanding coupled with another. At this time, Gyatso stood at the door. Lin Zhenying stood up and said, "Let's talk. I'll go out and take a look. By the way, I plan to go out and retrieve all those zombies tonight. They are scattered outside and will definitely endanger civilians." "Let's go together," Subai said. Lin Zhenying smiled and said, "Thank you." After saying that, he nodded to Gyatso and walked out. Gyatso walked to Subai and looked at him. It seems that he is recovering well. At this time, Gyatso gave Subai a different feeling. He became more reserved. Even his temperament had changed a lot, but Subai couldn't tell what the specific changes were. "It's okay, but what is the red pill?" Subai asked. "It's made from the essence and blood of animals like yaks on the Tibetan plateau. You people here in the Central Plains bought it to assist in sexual intercourse." Gyatso poured himself a glass of water and took a sip. "It's a shame Lin Zhenying found this thing for you to use, otherwise I might have to secretly go out and kill a few people, bleed them and feed them to you." Subai knew that Gyatso could really do such a thing. If he were a monk, he would be surprised. However, Gyatso, who is a great successor of Tantric Buddhism, has no resistance to such things. "Where's the fat man? Are you able to walk on the ground?" Gyatso did not answer directly. "You know, as long as I wake up, basically there won't be any big problems." "I really envy your bloodline." Gyatso smiled. "He is next door." Subai got out of bed. "Would you like to go take a look?" "You sure?" "What's wrong?" "Forget it, let's go see it with you." Subai and Gyatso walked to the next room together. There was a bathtub in the room. The fat man was sitting in the bathtub. There were a lot of things like glutinous rice in the bathtub, and the water was very turbid. When the fat man saw Subai coming in, his face showed bitterness. "Abai, help me." "What's wrong?" Subai asked strangely. However, the next moment, Subai saw a snake emerging from the water, crawling onto the fat man's shoulder and spitting out the letter. The fat man originally asked Lin Zhenying to get some chenyo rice for me to pull out the corpse poison, but who knew that he said that these poisonous snakes can also suck out the corpse poison, so he put a lot of poisonous snakes in the bathtub for me. "I'm so scared, I'm afraid of snakes, really." He said, "It's useful, just accept it, they are more professional than you," Subai said. "To put it lightly, can you imagine what it would feel like to have so many venomous snakes swimming past your balls?" The fat man looked desperate. At this time, the fat man suddenly thought of something and said, "By the way, I met a monk in the demon cave before. The monk asked me to bring a message to you." Subai raised his eyebrows and said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "This story world is a joke." Fatty frowned. "I never understood the meaning of this sentence." "Is this story world a joke?" Subai recited silently, looked at Gyatso, and found that Gyatso was also lowering his head in thought, and then looked at the fat man. "You saw him, why didn't you come out together?" "Originally, the monk and I were smashing the Buddha statue to get the relics inside, but suddenly a fox demon came, and the monk told me to leave first while he came to the rear." Subai was a little surprised. He felt that the monk should be a kind-hearted monk, but he should not be able to promote self-sacrifice in the story world. "What happened next?" Gyatso asked at this time. "Later." Fatty gritted his teeth. "After the monk said that, he kicked me off the Buddha statue, and then ran away with the relic. Do you know, I was moved within 3 seconds. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 110. After hearing the fat man's last words, Subai and Gyatso looked at each other. They both felt at the same time that this was like the way a monk would do things, because although a monk always gives people a feeling of compassion, he still doesn't do things. He is never pedantic, and sometimes he is even astonishingly straightforward. In short, it seems that he does not have the bad habits of a monk at all. The fat man continued to extract poison from the bathtub, while Subai and Gyatso walked around the village. Liang was greeting some craftsmen who were renovating the village. When he saw Subai and Gyatso, he also pretended I didn't see it. It's obviously impossible for them disciples to be as big-minded as Lin Zhenying. After walking for a while, dinner was served in Yizhuang. It was cooked by a Quan. Because he had to serve the craftsmen who had been busy all day, today was all about big pots of rice and big pots of food. Subai didn't regard himself as an outsider. After finding bowls and chopsticks, he filled the rice with some vegetables and went into the room to eat. Just as he put down the bowls and chopsticks, Gyatso walked in and threw a bag to Subai. Subai opened it and saw that it was full of red pills. "You went to rob?" Subai asked. Obviously, the amount was indeed large enough, and it didn't look like it was bought. "Alchemy." Gyatso said these 2 words without further ado, and then said, "Get ready, Lin Zhenying is determined to go out tonight to find those zombies." Subai took out a red pill, threw it into his mouth, and chewed it like a jelly bean. Subai wouldn't believe it when Gyatso said he got it through alms. He must have found a Tibetan businessman near here and got it from them. As for whether any coercive measures were used, Subai didn't know. Of course, he wouldn't care if he knew. "You said I only use this thing to replenish blood, will it cause any problems for me?" Subai still remembered that Gyatso said before that this thing was used as an auxiliary prop during sexual intercourse. "As far as I know, the blood in the zombie's body cannot freeze, so the body temperature is cold. How can the cavernous body below you become hard without being filled with blood? Oh no, or it may be that it has always been hard but cannot go soft." A meaningful smile suddenly appeared on the corner of Gyatso's mouth. Subai smiled and didn't take it seriously. He just said, "Did something happen to you that night?" When Gyatso heard these words, he nodded silently. From a Buddha to a demon, what changed was not only the strengthening of the root, but the most important thing was that it had begun to affect his state of mind. The previous Gyatso was polite and courteous. There is evidence that such a joke would never be made. Actually, it's quite good. I'm much closer to nature than before. Subai patted Gyatso's shoulder. Everyone had their own secrets and experiences. Gyatso didn't want to tell them, and Subai himself didn't want to tell them. "We'll ask, after the story of this mission is over, I will take you to the city to have some fun." At this time, the fat man also came over with his rice bowl. This guy obviously felt a little floaty when he walked. He must be as sick as a string. "Tonight we have to follow Lin Zhenying out to eliminate evil on behalf of the moon." The fat man's face was as wrinkled as a chrysanthemum. How about we do what we did last time and knock him out and tie him up? Isn't it nice to just stay here? Okay. Subai shook his head and objected directly, you can't do this. The last time we did that, it was a misunderstanding by chance. The fault was not with us, but even with Lin Zhenying, and he is the protagonist of this main mission one. The first time, it was still explainable. If this time, we deliberately and proactively knock him out, it would be a deliberate act of opportunism, and this will inevitably not trigger the punishment of a terrorist broadcast. The fat man stuck out his tongue and said, sure, what you said makes sense. Let's go transform into Sailor Moon together tonight. By the way, Lin Zhenying is also injured, and I am also injured. Abai, your energy has obviously not recovered yet. Damn it, Fan Monk seems to have gone dark, and he still doesn't know how much strength he has left. It's an understatement to say that our team is a ragtag bunch, but they are obviously a bunch of old, weak, sick, and disabled. Gyatso glanced at the fat man, and the fat man stared back at him. Their eyes intertwined for an instant, and then moved away. Apparently, not only Subai noticed Gyatso's change, but the fat man's eyes were also very sharp. Let's figure it out first. We can't let Lin Zhenying go alone. If there is any danger or accident, there is no need to bear it forcefully. Just take Lin Zhenying and leave first. Lin Zhenying is not that kind of rigid person, otherwise that night will not be the same. Won't watch those zombies leave. As he was speaking, Lin Zhenying had already put on his Taoist robe and walked over. By this time, the sky was getting dark. Subai took out another red pill and threw it into his mouth to chew. In fact, the previous conversation between him and Gyatso was just a joke. Subai absorbed the blood essence in the red pill and was directly decomposed by his own body. It will cause rapid congestion down there like other people eating this stuff. The fat man came close to Subai and asked, what are you eating? It smells delicious. Jelly beans, Subai said. Shall I do it too? The fat man said with a smile. Okay, open your mouth. Ah! The fat man immediately opened his mouth. Subai grabbed a handful and stuffed it directly into the fat man's mouth. The fat man chewed it for a while, swallowed it all, and smashed it into his mouth. It's not as delicious as expected, and it has a bit of a fishy smell. We haven't received any rumors about zombies hurting people in the past few days. Pandeo thinks there are two possibilities. One is that the zombie king was injured by us, so it has been dormant, and even the zombies cannot be killed. Restless and guarded him. The second possibility is that those zombies are not wreaking havoc in the towns, but in the mountains. Maybe some mountain villages have already encountered their vicious hands, but the news there is blocked, so it has not spread yet. Lin Zhenying said while leading the way. I think the latter is more likely. The zombie king is injured and needs more energy and blood to replenish himself. And after the zombies that were originally suppressed by you, Taoist priest, lose their restraints, the zombies' ferocity will burst out even more violently. They will definitely not be able to settle down, and they will not be able to settle down. A Liang and a Quan were left at home by Lin Zhenying and did not come out with them, so there were only 4 people in this team. In the front, Gyatso and Lin Zhenying were discussing the route. Behind them, Subai and the fat man were walking slowly. The stick under the fat man was already sticking out of his crotch, shaking out a tent, and he seemed a little nervous when walking. Fat man, we are here to catch zombies and not vixens. Why are you so excited? Subai, who knew the truth of the matter, still pretended not to know and teased from the side. Young and energetic, haha, young and energetic. The fat man was also a little puzzled. Not long after he came out, his lower body reacted naturally. How about we stop for a drink of water and take a rest, and you can find a woods to masturbate. There are no movies and no novels, so you have no time to masturbate? Are you still scratching your skin? Then look for any tree holes or the like. Usually there are moss bark on the tree holes, which just acts as lubrication. Hey, can you please stop making sarcastic remarks here? The fat man was a little angry, and then he looked left and right. How far is it? We are almost there. There is a village ahead. If everyone in that village is dead, it means we are very close. If everyone is still alive and kicking, it means we still have a long way to go, Subai said. Your speaking style is really postmodern. You fat guy can't walk. Wait, stop. Subai seemed to suddenly feel something. He raised his hand and motioned for everyone to stop. I smell that smell. When Lin Zhenying heard this, he did not doubt Subai's words at all, and directly started to take the equipment from the package. After all, although there were Taoist priests and Tibetan monks in the team, no matter how professional they were, there would be no one who was of the same kind and would have a deeper understanding. Gyatso said, I'll go to the front and take a look first. After saying that, he walked straight up. The rest were waiting where they were. 10 minutes later, Gyatso came back and said bluntly, the entire village was massacred by zombies. The team re-entered the village. The village was full of corpses lying everywhere. Most of the corpses were torn apart and severely damaged. Subai sat down next to a wellhead. Lin Zhenying and Gyatso continued to search. The fat man originally wanted to search, but in the end it was partly because he was tired, and partly because it was too inconvenient to hold a stick underneath. Seeing Subai sat by the wellhead to enjoy the wind and coolness, and he followed him and sat down by the wellhead. Fat man, have you seen the female body? Subai said coldly. Damn it, Abai, can you stop being so dirty? Can we be more upright, sunny, and positive? Oh, Subai nodded thoughtfully. Did you just fetch this water? The fat man reached out and touched it. Even in the summer, the temperature in the well water is always very cold, especially in the mountains. The composition of the well water is similar to that of spring water. Yes, just hit. The fat man was tired and thirsty at this time. Without saying a word, he reached out and took the bucket over. He drank several big gulps, then closed his eyes and poured a bucket of cold well water over himself. Face. Ha! It's cool. It tastes good. The fat man was so happy that the pores all over his body seemed to relax. Subai looked at the fat man in surprise. The fat man looked at himself and then asked, what are you doing? Did you see the female body? Fat master, I just drank a bucket of cold water, and now my heart is peaceful. If you don't believe me, just take a look. As he said that, the fat man deliberately spread his legs, and sure enough, the thing softened. Subai stood up and held the mouth of the well with both hands. I asked you if you saw the female body, why did you show me your crotch? Look, there is a female corpse under the well. The corpse has been soaked so much that it has turned into a giant. Ugh. The fat man immediately fell to his knees on the ground and began to vomit in disgust. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 111. Over there, Gyatso and Lin Zhenying came over after checking. They saw the fat man squatting next to the wellhead, retching and inserting his fingers into his throat and licking the ropes. They were a little confused. Subai clapped his hands. It's okay, did you find anything? Lin Zhenying opened his palms, and Subai saw some gray-brown ash on his palms. This kind of soil is only found in one place in this mountain. Although the boots on the feet of the zombies are not new, I did not let them wander around after I suppressed them. They have also been kept in the house waiting for the ghosts that come once a year. The door was opened to force them into reincarnation, so the soles of their shoes were still clean, and that's why they left such obvious traces after going to that place. Lead the way. Subai wiped his lips, then patted the fat man on the shoulder. Follow. The group of people continued to move deeper into the mountains. Not long after this time, Lin Zhenying signaled to stop, and then pointed to the mountain col ahead. That's it? The ore content in that area is very high, and the ground is full of black scum. Also, there is a cave at the other end, and those zombies should be hiding there. Then just go in and get rid of the zombie king once and for all before he recovers, Gyatso said. The last time we fought against the zombie king, there were Fatty, Subai, and now Lin Zhenying and Gyatso. The odds of winning were actually very high. Subai sniffed gently behind the three of them, feeling that things were going too smoothly. If all the zombies were killed so easily, wouldn't it be a waste of the name of this story world? Mr. Zombie. Are the zombies in this story world so easy to deal with? The four people walked down the relatively gentle side of the cliff and soon arrived at the cave. There were some broken clothes and minced meat outside the cave entrance, which basically confirmed that Lin Zhenying's speculation was correct. Lin Zhenying held the Bagua mirror in his hand, the mahogany sword behind his back, and the paper talisman in his other hand. He was the first to enter the cave, followed by Gyatso and Fatty. Subai deliberately stayed at the back. After the first three people entered, Subai gritted his teeth. He always felt that his sudden sense of crisis could not deceive him. This may be because he had obtained the origin of the zombie. Not afraid that he had distanced himself from the three people in front of him, Subai squatted at the entrance of the cave and reached out to rummage through the minced meat. It was this inadvertent action that made Subai make a major discovery. These minced meats, it's not the remains that were bitten out, but cut off with a sharp weapon. Subai's eyes narrowed slightly, and a scene appeared in his mind. A man was holding several pieces of clothing and a large piece of meat, standing outside the cave, using a sword or knife to chop the clothes into pieces, and chop the meat as well. Broken. It was impossible for zombies to hold weapons. Subai knew this very well. If there was a zombie here that evolved to the point where it knew how to use human weapons, then this zombie would really be incredible. In other words, someone deliberately set up this enchantment array here, deliberately deceiving everyone into believing it, and then walked into this cave. Cave, Subai muttered, damn it, the truth is that I came to this story world to make pangolins. After drilling this hole, I will drill into another hole. At this moment, Subai suddenly noticed something in the grass above the mountain col, which seemed to be watching here. A smile appeared at the corner of Subai's mouth. Obviously, the other party was a little panicked because he didn't go in for a long time. Pretending to be nonchalant, Subai sat down at the entrance of the cave. He was not worried about Gyatso, Fatty, and Lin Zhenying. With Gyatso and Fatty here, even if something happened, they could always hold on for a while. If he followed later or earlier, the effect would be almost the same. Moreover, for some reason, Subai didn't rush into the cave and yelled at everyone to come out. There was a scam here. When everyone is drunk and I am alone, it often means that you can discover some opportunities faster than others. Although he was sitting here, Subai kept looking at that position with the corner of his eye. After confirming the opponent's hiding place and planning his sprint route, Subai jumped up from the ground and rushed directly in that direction. The other party was obviously stunned by Subai's move, but he immediately came to his senses. Just above Subai, the grass began to swing. Subai knew clearly that it was the person who was monitoring him who was running away in panic. With his eyes focused, Subai did not follow in a straight line, but changed a direction. Finally, when a man wearing ordinary clothes ran into a forest and continued running while looking back, Subai slowly walked out in front of him with a grass stem in his mouth. Hey, Alyang, what are you doing here? When Subai's voice came, Alyang suddenly trembled, and then he looked directly in front of him. When he saw Subai standing in front of him calmly, Alyang said with a little trembling. I'm worried about Master, so I came here, To have a look, yes, to have a look. Subai nodded and walked slowly to Liang. Oh, that's it? You are also filial. I'm very touched. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, Subai hit Liang's neck with an elbow. Liang immediately rolled his eyes and fainted. Subai looked at Liang lying on the ground and smiled. You don't believe this yourself, do you? Abai didn't follow in the cave, the fat man said. Stop and wait, or let's go out and take a look first, Gyatso suggested. Lin Zhenying shook his head. No, we have already come in, and the breath of the living must have been sensed by the zombies. If we delay here for more time, those zombies may have left long ago. You go out to find him. Pandeo went in alone. The zombie king was seriously injured by Pandeo back then, and this time, there will be no exception. Lin Zhenying is obviously very confident in himself, but Gyatso and Fatty don't have much confidence in the current Lin Zhenying. Moreover, even if Lin Zhenying is in his prime now, if something unexpected happens, you will be killed if you die, but it will also cause you and others to fail the mission and have precious story points deducted. Why bother? At this time, some vague shadows appeared in front of them, and the surrounding temperature dropped rapidly. Lin Zhenying picked up his Bagua mirror. Then he used his own blood to consecrate the Bagua mirror and pointed it forward. The Bagua mirror released a red light and swept forward. Immediately afterwards, Gyatso's breathing stagnated. The fat man opened his mouth and completely forgot how to close it. Even Lin Zhenying's hands shook. In front of the three people, what appeared was indeed a zombie. But some of these zombies were wearing white and yellow mandarin jackets, some were wearing armor, and some were wearing silk palace clothes. Their frightening aura was so strong that it almost turned into water droplets. Snapped. A slap hit Liang's face, and Liang suddenly woke up from his coma. At this time, his hands and feet were tied, and Subai was sitting on the stone in front of him, looking at him. Tell me what's going on. I don't know. Liang pursed his lips and said this. Oh, I got it. Subai stopped talking nonsense and directly picked up the stone under his feet and smashed it down on Liang's ankle. Boom. 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 Liang let out a miserable scream. His ankles were dripping with blood and his bones were exposed. Obviously, it would be impossible for Liang to walk normally in the future, at least he would be a lame. Throwing the blood-stained stone aside, Subai clapped his hands. It doesn't matter if you don't tell me. I don't really want to know. It just so happens that I haven't sucked human blood for a while. It's a shame that I have to eat those disgusting things all day long. Panic. As Subai spoke, he exposed his vampire fangs, and his whole temperament instantly became extremely gloomy and weird. This was not a trick or a bluff, but the most direct external manifestation of the bloodline of this vampire family. Characteristics. Liang was immediately trembling with fear. When Subai's fangs gently penetrated his neck, Liang immediately shouted. I said. Subai pulled out his fangs again, leaving 2 bloody holes on Liang's neck. It's a monk. A monk called me here and asked me to arrange these things in the cave. Master, and you took a detour. I ran directly here, so my speed is faster than you. Monk, Subai licked his lips. What kind of monk? A very fair monk. What you said means you didn't say it. Subai continued to bend down, preparing to take another sip. His name is Kilu, his name is Kilu. I heard a woman next to him calling his name. I was fed poison by them, and Miss Chen was also fed. I must do things according to their instructions, otherwise, they will not give me any poison. I am the antidote. I have already experienced the feeling when the poison explodes in my body. I really don't dare to experience it a second time. I really don't dare. Liang started to shed tears and runny nose as he spoke. 7 laws? No. Subai suddenly felt that this whole thing was a bit inexplicable. The monk had already come out of the demon cave. And they also found Yizhuang, but why didn't they come to find themselves and Gyatso instead of hiding in the dark? He didn't even know what the hell he was doing. Of course Subai didn't think that he, Gyatso and the monk had a close relationship, but Subai just felt that it shouldn't be to the point of needing to plot behind the scenes. "What's in that cave?" Subai asked. "I don't know, I've never been in, and they didn't let me in," Liang replied, but in an instant, his body suddenly swelled up, like a flat tire that had been fully inflated. Subai unconsciously took a step back. Liang looked at Subai painfully. "Help me, save me." A fox paw print appeared on Liang's forehead. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 113. In a very exquisite courtyard, the monk is sitting cross-legged and meditating. Although the layout here is a bit small, in the story world, having such a quiet place for you to meditate is already considered a very high treatment. At this moment, the other audience members were still trying their best to protect Lin Zhenying, but the monk really could sit still, even a little too firmly. There is a woman in the pool. She looks a little sick and not very active, but even so, her figure is graceful and charming, coupled with this touch of temperament that I feel pity for. It makes people want to stop, but the sharpness flashing between his brows is something that a careful person cannot catch. "Monk, it hurts so much," the woman said, covering her belly with one hand, feeling very painful, and her frowning look made people feel panicked. The monk ignored him and continued to meditate, without even blinking his eyelids. He looked as steady as a mountain, as if he was asleep. "Monk, I'm going to be hurt to death," the woman shouted. "Come and see, I'm going to die, really." But the energy in the body is full, and it is not a sign of physical weakness. It is not night at this time, nor is it a time when the fetus is active. The monk said these words and continued to meditate. The woman laughed dryly, a little annoyed at herself, and also complained that the monk was too ignorant of the style, and did not understand that he was deliberately pretending to be stupid. She reached out and picked out a lotus flower in the pool, put it under her nose and smelled it, but she felt that she really didn't like the smell. She was still used to the smell and feeling in the demon cave. Once she came out, the world was so wide. It made her feel very uneasy. Of course, the most important reason was because of her body. She had become weak and very weak. The woman's hand touched her belly. There was an obvious bulge there, which meant she was obviously pregnant. Women's uneasiness comes from here. After cultivating to a certain level, the level of life is already very high, and ordinary low-level women will not let themselves get pregnant at all. This time, I am pregnant because my own demon energy essence condensed into a woman in my body. From a scientific point of view, new life is self-fertilized. This was a scene she didn't want to see, but it was also a scene she expected to see. Pregnancy would suddenly make her situation very dangerous. It was not the only tyrannical monster suppressed in the demon cave, but for fear of because she became weak due to pregnancy, other monsters in the demon cave took advantage of her. With the help of the monk, she left the demon cave. Of course, the reason why she wants to give birth to this child instead of aborting it is not because of the overflow of maternal love, but because she knows that the baby in her body is a kind of gathering of spiritual energy from heaven and earth, waiting for her to give birth to this child. If she comes down and eats more, her physical body and soul level will obviously make a bigger leap, which is something that is hard for her to refuse. Tiger poison cannot eat its seeds, but this woman has been planning to swallow her own child. Now, there are still 2 or 3 days before the birth date of the child she sensed. On that day, she will become the most powerful. She was weak, so she needed someone's protection. The monk gained her trust. Of course, she also paid the monk. "Monk, those few people look like you, but why do you want them to die?" But, the Buddha said, cannot be said. The woman rolled her eyes at the monk. Do you want them to die, or do you want the Taoist priest to die? The monk still didn't answer. In fact, he and the woman had been in this state since the day they left the demon cave. The woman suddenly let out a long laugh, then quickly appeared in front of the monk, put her hands against the monk's face, and said ferociously, "You will definitely not be satisfied with what I give you. What else do you want?" The monk continued to remain unmoved. He ignored the woman's anger and changing temper at all, and just continued to recite his Buddhist scriptures quietly. "Say it," the woman looked very excited. She was originally a violent personality, but now that she was pregnant with Lyogia, that personality was almost amplified to the extreme. If it weren't for leaving the demon cave and suddenly entering the world of heaven, looking down, she didn't know what she would do in this emotional state. The monk slowly opened his eyes and looked into the woman's eyes. "I want a leg, poor monk," the monk finally answered. Asking for a leg is naturally not the monk's own, nor the woman's own, but the leg of the baby in the woman's belly. However, when the monk communicates with the woman, it seems to be as simple as asking for a chicken leg. Ordinary leg. "Do you want a leg?" The woman's eyes kept changing with different colors. "I really don't want to give it to you, but I am still willing to sign a soul poison oath with you for this. As long as you protect me well and protect me if the delivery goes smoothly, I'll give you one of my child's legs." After saying that, the woman began to mutter something, and then, a drop of blood appeared from between her eyebrows, and the blood floated between the woman and the monk. "Monk, it's your turn to make an oath and then deliver it to heaven. If you violate this oath, you will be struck by 5 thunders." People in metaphysics cannot swear oaths casually, because they themselves are much closer and more sensitive to the way of heaven than ordinary people, so once they swear poisonous oaths indiscriminately, once they violate the oath, there is a high chance that they will be punished by themselves. The oath of a woman is cursed, and this oath of a woman is more like a witness in front of heaven and earth. And in this story world with a strong supernatural atmosphere, the law of heaven will be particularly sensitive. Even a fat man can attract thunder from the sky. Which is enough to show how clearly aware the way of heaven in this story world is. The monk did not hesitate and murmured a few words, and then a drop of blood flowed from his eyebrows, which merged with the woman's blood, and then floated away together. The woman seemed to be satisfied now. Even though she had to sacrifice a leg of her child, she felt really distressed. It was not the distress of cherishing her child, but the distress of having to share a part of her own food. She reached out and picked up a bunch of grapes, and opened her mouth to eat. As she continued to eat, the woman suddenly stopped, and then the corners of her mouth rose slightly. "Monk, one of those people didn't enter the cave." Seeing the fox paw mark, Subai rubbed it with his fingers. At this time, Alyang was unable to speak because of the extreme pain, and could only twitch involuntarily. Subai hesitated for a while, then put his finger on the mark and pressed it lightly. The mark immediately seemed to come alive. Alyang's pupils suddenly turned completely blue at this time, and at the same time, all the bulging areas on his body dissipated. "It's you." Alyang spoke, but his tone seemed so arrogant, a bit unattainable, and it was soft and sweet, and seemed to be able to soften people's bones. Subai smiled and then nodded. "It's me." Of course Subai knew who was using Alyang's body to talk now, that Sao Fox. "Even if you don't let me sleep with you, you actually stole the baby I used to grind my teeth. This is too unkind. Now my teeth are itching, but I have no place to relieve it." Subai shrugged. "Let me tell you, can we talk normally? You must know that you are borrowing a man's body now, and I can't stand it when you talk so coquettishly." "Haha, the monk is right. You are also a very shameless person. It seems that this is indeed the case." "Monk is with you?" Subai asked, and the tone of these words translates to, "My man said that you are a very shameless person." "Cheng-ah, I always thought that the monk was very special, but I really didn't expect him to be so serious about it. Sure enough, monks are not good at women, but they still like female creatures. You should know. Didn't you already know it from this person's mouth? Why do you still ask questions knowingly? Yes, the monk is with me now. I have come out of the demon hole. The monk now massages and rubs my shoulders every day. Be good. Sudbai closed his eyes slightly, and many thoughts were swirling in his heart. There was about half a minute of silence, because Sudbai didn't speak, and the fox over there didn't speak either. Finally, it was Sudbai who broke the silence. "So fox, are you dying?" This time, it was the other side's turn to be silent. After a while, the other person spoke again. "Have I been tricked?" Sudbai nodded, "Absolutely. Come see me tonight in the backyard of the county government office. You yourself have admitted that you are about to die. What else should I do? Burn paper money for you?" The monk said that when this tongue wakes up, you can ask him to write his master's name and you will know. After saying this, the mark on Liang's forehead disappeared immediately. He immediately woke up and put his hands on his throat, coughing out acidic water, looking very painful. Seeing that he was not done yet, Sudbai kicked him and Liang rolled several times on the ground and knelt on the ground. "Don't kill me, please, don't kill me, really don't kill me." Sudbai picked up a branch under his feet and threw it in front of Liang. "Write your master's name." Liang was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that Sudbai would actually make such a request. However, frightened by Sudbai's pressure, he nodded, reached out and picked up the branch, and began to write his master's poem on the slightly softer ground under his feet. Name. Sudbai originally didn't want to understand why the fox would let him do this, and what was the mystery behind it. However, when Liang raised his head and said to Sudbai, "I've written it," he saw 3 people on the ground. Sudbai's expression suddenly changed. Lin Zhenying.